The knock on my door came at 8:30 in the morning, while I was watching 3 feet of snow pile up outside my window, and trying to figure out if my power was going to hold through the blizzard that had been hammering Connecticut for the past 18 hours. I opened the door to find Patricia Hendricks standing there in a puffy white coat that made her look like the Michelin Man. Her face pinched into that expression I had come to know and despise over the past 2 years of living in Meadowbrook Estates. She was the vice president of our homeowners association, a woman in her mid-50s who seemed to derive genuine pleasure from making everyone else's life miserable. "Good morning, Jason," she said, not waiting for an invitation before pushing past me into my foyer, tracking snow all over the hardwood floors I had just refinished last month. "I need to discuss a serious violation with you." I closed the door and tried to keep my voice level. "Patricia, there's a state of emergency declared. The governor told everyone to stay inside. What could possibly be so important that you came out in this?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was my backyard from last night, specifically the fire pit I had going while the snow fell around it. The flames looked warm and inviting in the picture, which I had taken myself and posted on my Instagram with the caption, "Staying warm during the storm." "This," she said, jabbing her finger at the screen, "is a clear violation of Meadowbrook Estates HOA bylaws section 12.4, which states that open flames are prohibited on residential properties, except for approved barbecue grills used exclusively for cooking purposes." I stared at her. "You're joking." "I most certainly am not. This is a serious fire hazard, especially during a weather emergency. I've already filed a formal complaint, and I'm here to inform you that you're being fined $500. If you continue to use this fire pit, the fines will increase to $1,000 per day." My jaw actually dropped. "Patricia, my power's been flickering on and off since midnight. That fire pit is keeping me warm." It's a legal, properly installed outdoor fire feature that came with the house when I bought it 2 years ago. "The previous owners never used it," she said primly. "And just because something exists doesn't mean it's compliant with our current regulations. The HOA board updated the bylaws 18 months ago. 18 months ago, I never received any notification about changes to the bylaws. We sent an email to all residents. I never got any email." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's not my problem." Ignorance of the rules doesn't excuse violations. Now, I expect you to extinguish that fire pit immediately and keep it extinguished, or I'll have no choice but to report you to the proper authorities. Something about the way she said that last part made my blood boil. What authorities would those be exactly? The fire department, for one. I'm sure they'd be very interested to know that you're operating an illegal fire feature during a state of emergency. "Patricia, I really think you should reconsider this. The fire pit is completely safe. It's surrounded by stone. It's 30 feet from my house, and it's designed specifically for this purpose. There's no way it's a violation of any actual fire codes. We'll let the fire department decide that." She pulled out her phone and started dialing right there in my hallway. I couldn't believe what I was watching. This woman was actually calling the fire department during a blizzard, when they should be focused on actual emergencies, just to complain about my perfectly safe fire pit. "Yes, hello," she said when someone answered. "I'd like to report a fire hazard in Meadowbrook Estates. My neighbor has an open fire burning in his backyard during the snowstorm, and I'm concerned it poses a danger to the community." I listened as she gave them my address and provided an exaggerated description of the fire pit that made it sound like I had built a bonfire the size of a small house. When she hung up, she had a satisfied smile on her face. "They're sending someone over. I'll wait with you until they arrive." "You really don't have to do that," I said through gritted teeth. "Oh, I insist. This is my responsibility as an HOA board member." The next 45 minutes were among the most uncomfortable of my life. Patricia stood in my living room, refusing to sit down, occasionally making comments about various things she found objectionable in my decorating choices. Apparently, my curtains were half an inch too long according to some obscure bylaw about window treatments, and the color of my front door was technically supposed to be approved by the Architectural Review Committee before I painted it, even though it was the same color it had been when I bought the place. When the fire truck finally pulled up outside, I actually felt relieved. At least the firefighters would be reasonable people who could explain to Patricia why she was being ridiculous. I opened the door to find 3 firefighters in full gear trudging through the snow toward my house. The one in front, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with Captain Reynolds on his jacket, looked tired and not particularly happy to be there. "Someone here called about a fire hazard," he asked. Patricia pushed forward. "Yes, that was me. This resident has an open fire burning in his backyard in violation of fire codes and HOA regulations. I need you to cite him and make him put it out." Captain Reynolds looked from Patricia to me, then sighed. "Can we see this fire pit?" "Of course," I said. "Come on through." I led them through my house to the back deck. The snow was still coming down heavily, and my fire pit was barely visible through the white curtain of falling flakes, but you could see the warm glow of the fire I had carefully maintained through the night. Captain Reynolds walked down the deck stairs and approached the fire pit, his 2 colleagues following. They spent about 2 minutes examining it, the surrounding area, and the setup. Then they came back up to the deck, where Patricia and I were waiting. "Sir," Captain Reynolds said, addressing me, "this is one of the nicest fire pit installations I've seen. Proper stone surround, appropriate distance from structures, built-in spark arrestor, and you've even got a fire extinguisher mounted on your deck rail within easy reach. This is completely legal and up to code." Patricia's face turned red. "But it's an open flame." "Yes, madam, it's an outdoor fire pit. They're allowed in this county as long as they meet certain specifications, which this one does and then some. There's no fire hazard here." "But the HOA bylaws specifically prohibit open flames." Captain Reynolds turned to her with an expression I can only describe as deeply weary. "Madam, HOA bylaws don't supersede fire codes. If this fire pit meets county fire safety regulations, which it does, then it's legal to operate. Your HOA can't prohibit something that's explicitly allowed by law." "That can't be right," Patricia insisted. "We have the authority to regulate what happens on properties in our community." "You have some authority," one of the other firefighters spoke up. He was younger, maybe in his 30s. "But you can't override state and county ordinances. Fire safety is regulated at the state level. If you tried to fine this gentleman for operating a legal fire feature, he could take you to court and win." Patricia looked like she had been slapped. There must be some mistake. "I'll need to speak with my attorney." "You're welcome to do that," Captain Reynolds said, "but I'm telling you right now this fire pit is legal." "Sir," he nodded at me, "you're good to keep using it. Stay warm out here." "Thank you, Captain. I really appreciate you coming out in this weather." "No problem. Though for future reference," he glanced at Patricia, "maybe save the emergency calls for actual emergencies during a state of emergency." After the firefighters left, Patricia stood on my deck for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Finally, she said, "This isn't over. I'm calling an emergency HOA board meeting." "You do that," I said, too tired and too irritated to care anymore. "Now please leave my property." She stomped through my house and slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on my deck, watching the fire pit burn and feeling a small sense of victory. That feeling lasted about 3 hours. My email dinged with a message from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. The subject line read, "Emergency Board Meeting Regarding Fire Pit Violation." The message informed me that an emergency meeting had been called for 6 o'clock that evening, and that my attendance was strongly encouraged. It also mentioned that the board would be reviewing options for enforcement action regarding my continued violation of community standards. I called my buddy Marcus, who had gone through his own HOA nightmare in Massachusetts a few years back. "Dude," he said when I explained the situation, "you need a lawyer. Like yesterday. For a fire pit. No, for an HOA that's about to make your life hell. Trust me on this. These people don't back down. They'll fine you, put liens on your property, and make it impossible to sell your house. I've seen it happen. The fire department literally said it's legal. Doesn't matter. HOAs operate in their own little world. You need someone who knows how to fight them." I spent the next hour making calls. The problem was that most lawyers were either unreachable because of the storm or booked solid. Finally, I got through to someone named David Richardson, who specialized in HOA disputes. He agreed to a phone consultation. "Okay," David said after I explained everything. "First, good news. You're absolutely in the right here. Fire pits are legal in your county as long as they meet specifications, which yours apparently does. An HOA cannot prohibit something that's explicitly legal under state and local ordinances. Connecticut law is very clear about this." That's what the fire captain said. "Right, but here's the problem. Your HOA can still make your life miserable while you fight them. They can levy fines, and even though those fines would be thrown out in court, getting to that point costs time and money. What you need to do is establish, very clearly and on the record, that their bylaws are unenforceable in this specific case." "How do I do that?" "Well, the first step is this meeting tonight. I'd go if I were you. Bring documentation. Print out the county fire codes, bring photos of your fire pit setup, get a written statement from the fire department if you can. Make it clear that you know your rights and that you're not going to be pushed around. And if they fine me anyway, then we file a lawsuit to invalidate the fines and get an injunction preventing them from enforcing that section of the bylaws. It's not complicated legally, but it is a pain. The good news is that if we win, which we almost certainly would, the HOA would likely have to pay your legal fees." I thanked him and spent the rest of the afternoon gathering documentation. The snow had finally stopped around 2 in the afternoon, leaving Meadowbrook Estates buried under more than 3 feet of pristine white powder. The roads weren't going to be cleared until tomorrow at the earliest, which meant the meeting would probably be sparsely attended. That actually worried me. Patricia and her cronies on the board would definitely be there, but normal residents who might be sympathetic probably wouldn't brave the conditions. At 5:45, I bundled up and walked the 3 blocks to the community center where HOA meetings were held. The building was a small brick structure that the HOA had built with a special assessment 5 years ago, which apparently had been a whole other controversy I had only heard about secondhand. Inside, the heat was cranked up to an uncomfortable degree. Patricia was already there, along with the HOA president, a man named Donald Carmichael, who was in his early 60s, and had the general demeanor of someone who would rather be literally anywhere else. The secretary, Linda Wu, sat at a small table with her laptop, and the treasurer, Robert Hayes, was studying some papers. The only other resident who had showed up was my next-door neighbor, Frank Patterson, a retired teacher in his 70s who gave me a small nod when I walked in. "Good evening, Jason," Donald said, sounding genuinely apologetic. "I understand we're here to discuss your fire pit." "That's right," Patricia jumped in before I could respond. "Jason has been operating an illegal fire feature in clear violation of our bylaws, and when I tried to address the issue, he was hostile and uncooperative." "That's not even remotely true," I said. "You showed up at my house during a blizzard to complain about a fire pit that the fire department confirmed is completely legal, and I wasn't hostile. I was confused about why you thought this was an appropriate time to go around enforcing HOA rules." "The timing is irrelevant," Patricia said. "A violation is a violation." Donald held up his hand. "Let's keep this civil. Jason, I've reviewed the bylaws, and Patricia is technically correct that Section 12.4 prohibits open flames except for barbecue grills used for cooking." "Okay," I said, pulling out my folder of documents. "But here's the thing. That bylaw is unenforceable because it conflicts with county ordinance." I laid out printed copies of the relevant fire codes. Fire pits are explicitly allowed in this county as long as they meet safety specifications. Mine does, which was confirmed by Captain Reynolds of the Bridgeport Fire Department. I laid out the business card the captain had given me. Connecticut state law prevents HOAs from prohibiting things that are legal under state and local regulations. Linda, the secretary, leaned forward to look at the documents. "Is this true?" "It's a trick," Patricia said. "He's trying to confuse us with legal jargon." "It's not jargon," I said. "It's the law. I spoke with an attorney who specializes in HOA disputes this afternoon. If you try to find me for operating a legal fire feature, I'll take this to court, and I'll win. And according to Connecticut law, when a homeowner wins a case against an HOA for trying to enforce an illegal bylaw, the HOA has to pay the homeowner's legal fees." Robert, the treasurer, suddenly looked very interested. "How much are we talking?" My attorney estimated $15,000 to $20,000 for a straightforward case like this. Robert turned to Patricia. "We don't have that kind of money in the legal defense fund." "He's bluffing," Patricia said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "I'm really not," I said. "Look, I'm not trying to cause problems. I just want to use my fire pit. It's safe, it's legal, and it was on the property when I bought the house. I did my due diligence before moving here. I checked local ordinances. I never got any notification about bylaw changes." Linda was scrolling through something on her laptop. "Actually, I'm looking at our records, and there's no evidence that Jason was on the email list when we sent out the bylaw update notification 18 months ago. He must have been added to the list after that went out." "That's not my fault," Patricia said. "Actually, it kind of is," Donald said quietly. "Patricia, you were in charge of maintaining the email list at that time." The room got very quiet. Patricia's face was turning an alarming shade of red. "Furthermore," Donald continued, "I'm looking at this county ordinance Jason provided, and he's right. We can't prohibit something that's explicitly legal. I don't know why no one caught this when we were updating the bylaws." "Because no one was using fire pits back then," Robert said. "It seemed like a reasonable safety measure." "But it's not enforceable," Linda said, "which means if we try to find Jason, we're opening ourselves up to a lawsuit we'll definitely lose." Frank, my neighbor, finally spoke up. "If I may add something. I've been watching Jason use his fire pit for months now. He's extremely responsible with it. He never leaves it unattended. He always has water or a fire extinguisher nearby, and he only uses it when weather conditions are safe. Last night during the storm, I was glad to see it burning. It meant that if my power went out, I could have knocked on his door and he would have helped me stay warm." "Thank you, Frank," I said. Patricia stood up abruptly. "This is absurd. We're just going to let him ignore our rules." "Patricia," Donald said, and his voice had an edge to it now, "the rule is unenforceable. We have no choice but to let him use his fire pit. If we don't, we're exposing the HOA to significant financial liability. Then we need to change the bylaws back. We can't change them to prohibit something that's legal under county ordinance. That's the whole point." Patricia grabbed her purse. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when someone's house burns down because of that death trap." She stormed out, slamming the community center door hard enough that I was surprised the glass didn't shatter. Donald rubbed his temples. "I apologize, Jason. Patricia means well, but she sometimes gets overzealous." "She called the fire department during a state of emergency," I pointed out. "That's beyond overzealous." "I know. Look, as far as the board is concerned, this matter is closed. You're free to use your fire pit. We'll update the bylaws at the next regular meeting to clarify that fire pits are allowed as long as they meet county specifications. Does that work for you?" "That works perfectly, thank you." Robert cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all this. Patricia has been on a bit of a power trip lately. She's been citing people for the most minor things. Someone got fined because their trash can was visible from the street for more than 12 hours, even though it was because the trash company was delayed by a day." "Is there anything we can do about that?" Frank asked. "I mean, as residents," Donald sighed. "There are procedures for removing board members, but they're complicated and require a majority vote of the full membership. Patricia does have her supporters in the community. Some people appreciate her attention to detail." "Attention to detail is one thing," I said. "Harassment is another." "Agreed. I'll have a conversation with her about appropriate enforcement priorities." I left the meeting feeling somewhat vindicated, but also uneasy. Patricia didn't seem like the type of person to let something like this go. She had been publicly embarrassed by the fire department and then overruled by her own board. In my experience, people like that usually found ways to get revenge. I wasn't wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 separate violation notices from the HOA. The first claimed that my mailbox was showing signs of wear and needed to be replaced or repainted. I had just painted it 4 months ago. The second stated that I had left my trash cans visible from the street for more than the allowed 12 hours, which was technically true because the trash company had been a day late due to the storm backlog, but that hardly seemed like my fault. The third was my favorite. Apparently, the wreath on my front door violated the bylaws because it contained non-seasonal decorations. It was a simple evergreen wreath with a red bow. I had bought it at Home Depot. Each violation came with a warning that fines would be assessed if the issues weren't corrected within 10 days. I took photos of everything and forwarded them to David Richardson, the attorney I had consulted. He called me back within an hour. "This is textbook harassment," he said. "She's retaliating against you for the fire pit issue. The good news is that this actually strengthens your case if we need to take legal action. The bad news is that she's probably going to keep doing this until you push back hard. What do you recommend?" "Write a formal response to each violation notice, documenting why they're frivolous. Keep copies of everything. If she continues, we send her a cease and desist letter, and if that doesn't work, we file for a restraining order and sue for harassment." "How much is this going to cost me?" "Depends how far we have to take it. But remember, if we win, they pay your legal fees." I spent that evening drafting responses. For the mailbox, I included dated photos showing its pristine condition. For the trash cans, I included a copy of the trash company's notice about delayed pickup, due to the storm. For the wreath, I pointed out that the bylaws said nothing about what could or couldn't be on seasonal decorations, and that evergreen wreaths were traditional year-round door decorations in New England. I submitted all 3 responses through the HOA's online portal and thought that might be the end of it. 2 days later, I came home from work to find a notice taped to my front door. This one informed me that the Architectural Review Committee needed to conduct an inspection of my property to ensure compliance with community standards. The inspection was scheduled for the following Saturday at 9 in the morning, and my presence was required. I called David again. "Can they do this? Just demand to inspect my property. Let me check your HOA's governing documents," I heard him typing. "Okay, so they do have the right to conduct inspections, but there have to be reasonable grounds for the inspection. They can't just decide to inspect your property because they are annoyed with you. What counts as reasonable grounds? Usually, visible violations or credible complaints from neighbors. But 3 frivolous violation notices in 2 weeks, followed by a mandatory inspection. That's a pattern of harassment. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to draft a letter to send to the HOA board, not to Patricia, but to the president. We're going to lay out the pattern of behavior, cite the relevant case law about HOA harassment, and put them on notice that if this continues, we're taking legal action. How does that sound? It sounds expensive. I'll do the letter for a flat fee of $500. If we have to go further, we'll discuss it. But honestly, Jason, this letter alone might be enough. Once the other board members realize they're being exposed to personal liability because of Patricia's vendetta, they'll rein her in. Okay, let's do it." David sent the letter via certified mail to Donald Carmichael, with copies to all the other board members except Patricia. The letter was 6 pages long and very thoroughly documented every action Patricia had taken against me, starting with the fire pit incident and continuing through all the subsequent violation notices. It cited several Connecticut cases where HOA board members had been found personally liable for harassment and had been forced to pay damages to homeowners. The letter concluded by demanding that all pending violations be withdrawn and that Patricia cease all retaliatory action against me. It also informed the board that if the scheduled inspection went forward without legitimate grounds, I would file for a restraining order and pursue legal action for harassment. I received a call from Donald Carmichael the day after he received the letter. "Jason, I owe you an apology," he said. He sounded tired. "I had no idea Patricia was doing all this. She's been sending these violation notices without bringing them to the full board for review, which she's not supposed to do. The inspection she scheduled, the rest of us didn't even know about it. So what happens now? I've withdrawn all the violation notices. They're void. The inspection is canceled, and I've removed Patricia from her position as vice president. The board voted on it last night in an emergency session. You voted her off. We didn't have much choice. Your attorney's letter made it very clear that she was exposing us to significant legal liability. Plus, when we started looking into it, we found out she's been harassing other residents too. You're not the only one who's been getting frivolous violation notices. There are at least 6 other homeowners who have been dealing with the same kind of thing. Why didn't anyone say anything? Most people don't want to make waves. They just pay the fines and fix whatever Patricia complains about, even if it's ridiculous. But your lawyer's letter connected all the dots. We realized we have a serious problem. Is Patricia facing any consequences? Well, she's off the board. And I've advised her that if she continues to harass you or any other resident, the HOA will not defend her in any legal action. She'll be on her own. How did she take that? Donald laughed, but it was a bitter sound. About as well as you'd expect. She threatened to sue us. Her husband had to practically drag her out of the meeting. I'm sorry this got so messy. Don't be. This needed to happen. Patricia has been a problem for a while, but she always managed to stay just on the right side of the line. Going after you was a miscalculation on her part. She picked someone who actually knew their rights and was willing to fight back. I thought that was the end of it. The violation notices were withdrawn, Patricia was off the board, and life could go back to normal. I used my fire pit regularly through the rest of the winter, and nobody said a word about it. Spring came, and I started planting my garden. Then, on a Saturday morning in early April, I was woken up at 6 in the morning by pounding on my door. I stumbled downstairs in my bathrobe to find 2 police officers on my porch. Jason Yardley, one of them asked. Yes, that's me. What's this about? We received a complaint about a disturbance at this address. Someone reported screaming and sounds of violence. I blinked at them, confused. There's no one here but me. I've been asleep. Do you mind if we take a look around? Actually, I do mind. I know my rights. Unless you have a warrant, I'm not letting you search my house at 6 in the morning based on some anonymous complaint. The officers looked at each other. The younger one seemed annoyed, but the older one nodded. That's fair. Can you at least confirm that you're alone and that there's no emergency situation? I'm alone. There's no emergency. I was literally asleep until you knocked. Okay. We're going to note that in our report. But sir, if we get called back here, we're going to have to investigate more thoroughly. After they left, I stood in my doorway, fuming. There was no way this was a coincidence. I pulled out my phone and called David Richardson, even though it was barely 6:30 in the morning. Someone called in a false police report about me, I said when he answered. They claimed there was screaming and violence at my house. The police just left. David was quiet for a moment. Jason, this is serious. Filing a false police report is a crime. If Patricia is behind this, and I think we both suspect she is, she's crossed a major line. What do I do? First, file your own police report documenting what happened. Tell them you suspect this is harassment related to your HOA dispute. Get a case number. Then we need to gather evidence. You have a doorbell camera or any security system? No, but I've been thinking about getting one. Do it today. Get cameras that cover your front door, back door, and anywhere else someone might access your property. If Patricia or anyone else is behind this, they'll probably try again, and we need video evidence. I spent that Saturday installing a comprehensive security system. I got a Ring doorbell camera for the front and 2 additional cameras covering the backyard and side of the house. They were all internet connected and saved footage to the cloud. A week later, I got another early morning visit from the police. This time, someone had reported that I was having a loud party at 4 in the morning that was disturbing the neighbors. Again, I had been asleep. But this time, I had the Ring doorbell footage to prove it. Officers, I have a camera system now, I said. I can show you footage from 4 a.m. There was no party. There wasn't even anyone outside. The same older officer from the first visit looked at the footage on my phone. Mr. Yardley, someone is making false reports about you. That's a crime. I suggest you file a formal complaint. I plan to. You know who called these in? The calls came from different numbers. Both claimed to be concerned neighbors who wanted to remain anonymous. But you have the numbers they called from, right? We do. And if you file a formal complaint, our detectives will investigate. I went to the police station that afternoon and filed a detailed complaint. I brought copies of all the documentation from my HOA dispute, the timeline of harassment from Patricia, and the camera footage proving that the recent complaints had been false. The detective I spoke with, A woman named Detective Sarah Morrison listened to everything carefully. "This is definitely harassment," she said. "The question is, can we prove who's doing it? You mentioned you suspect a specific person, Patricia Hendricks. She lives at 428 Maple Drive in Meadowbrook Estates. She's the former vice president of our HOA, and she's been escalating her behavior since she was removed from the board." "Okay, we'll look into this. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. Keep your cameras running. And if anything else happens, call us immediately." 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from my Ring camera. Someone was in my backyard. I pulled up the app and saw a figure dressed in dark clothing approaching my fire pit. They were carrying something. I dialed 911. "Someone is trespassing in my backyard right now. I have them on camera." The dispatcher kept me on the line while officers were dispatched. I watched through my phone as the figure poured something around my fire pit. Then they pulled out what looked like a lighter. "They're trying to start a fire," I told the dispatcher. "They just poured something flammable around my fire pit area." "Officers are 2 minutes away, sir. Stay inside and stay on the line." I watched as police cars pulled up outside my house, lights off. Officers moved quickly into my backyard. The figure tried to run but didn't get far. Within seconds, they were on the ground, being handcuffed. Even in the dark, even with the grainy camera footage, I recognized the puffy white coat. Patricia Hendricks had just been arrested in my backyard. The next few hours were a blur. Police came to my door to get a statement. I showed them all the camera footage, which clearly showed Patricia entering my property, pouring what turned out to be gasoline around my fire pit area, and attempting to light it on fire. The fire department was called to safely clean up the gasoline. Detective Morrison showed up around 4 in the morning. "Mr. Yardley, I have to say, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've never seen someone self-destruct quite this spectacularly. Miss Hendricks was carrying a 2-gallon gas can, a lighter, and get this, a printout of your HOA's fire pit bylaw. She's been charged with trespassing, attempted arson, filing false police reports, and we're looking at adding stalking charges. What happens now? She's in custody. She'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. Given the serious nature of the charges, especially the attempted arson, I expect bail will be set pretty high. This isn't going to go away quietly for her. And the false police reports. You figured out those were her." The phone records connected back to her cell phone and her husband's cell phone. She wasn't even trying to hide it after the first couple of calls. She wanted you to know it was her. She wanted you to feel harassed. I sat down on my couch, suddenly exhausted. This is insane. All of this because I wanted to use a legal fire pit. "It's not really about the fire pit," Detective Morrison said. "It's about control. Some people can't handle losing control. When you fought back, when you stood up for your rights, it threatened her entire worldview. She saw you as someone who needed to be punished." Patricia's arraignment made the local news. A middle-aged HOA board member arrested for attempted arson was apparently quite the story. The bail was set at $50,000, which her husband posted. She was released under strict conditions. No contact with me, no entry onto my property, and mandatory ankle monitoring. The HOA held another emergency meeting a week later. This time, the community center was packed. Everyone wanted to talk about what had happened. Donald Carmichael looked like he had aged 10 years. "I want to start by apologizing to Jason Yardley and to the entire community. The board failed in our oversight responsibilities. We allowed Patricia Hendricks to abuse her position, and it led to criminal behavior. We're implementing new policies to ensure this never happens again." "What kind of policies?" someone in the back asked. "First, All violation notices must be reviewed and approved by at least 3 board members before they're sent to residents. Second, we're hiring a property management company to handle day-to-day enforcement, which will provide a neutral third party between the board and residents. Third, we're conducting a complete review of all our bylaws to ensure they are enforceable and reasonable. And fourth, we're setting up a formal appeals process for any resident who feels they've been unfairly cited. Frank, my neighbor, stood up. What about the people Patricia harassed before this? Are we doing anything to make them whole? We're refunding all fines that Patricia levied without board approval, Robert Hayes said. That's coming out of the HOA's reserve fund, but we feel it's the right thing to do. After the meeting, several residents came up to me to apologize and to thank me for standing up to Patricia. Apparently, she had made a lot of people miserable over the past few years, but I was the first person who had really fought back. Patricia's trial was scheduled for late June. The prosecutor offered her a plea deal. Plead guilty to attempted arson and filing false reports, accept a suspended sentence with 5 years of probation, community service, mandatory counseling, and permanent removal from the HOA. The alternative was going to trial, where she faced up to 10 years in prison for the attempted arson charge alone. She took the plea deal. I attended the sentencing hearing. Patricia looked small and defeated, nothing like the imperious woman who had barged into my house during the snowstorm 6 months earlier. She read a prepared statement apologizing for her actions, though it sounded rehearsed and insincere. The judge was not impressed. "Miss Hendricks," he said, "you held a position of trust within your community, and you abused that trust repeatedly. You harassed Mr. Yardley and other residents for no reason other than your own sense of power. When that wasn't enough, you escalated to criminal behavior that could have resulted in serious injury or death. You should be grateful that the prosecutor offered you this deal, because if you had gone to trial, I would have pushed for the maximum sentence." He accepted the plea deal but added additional conditions. Patricia was required to complete 200 hours of community service, attend anger management counseling for 2 years, and she was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Connecticut. She was also ordered to pay restitution for all the costs associated with the case, including my legal fees. David Richardson had kept meticulous records. Between his fees, the security system I had installed, and various other costs related to defending myself against Patricia's harassment, the total came to just over $18,000. Patricia's husband looked like he might be sick when the judge read that number. After the hearing, the prosecutor, a young woman named Amanda Ortiz, approached me outside the courtroom. "I wanted you to know," she said, "that your documentation made this case incredibly easy to prosecute. The timeline you provided, the camera footage, everything. Most victims of this kind of harassment don't have that level of evidence. I had a good lawyer who told me to document everything. It shows. Cases like this usually devolve into he said, she said, but you had everything on video time-stamped, backed up to the cloud." It didn't give Hendricks any room to maneuver. Her lawyer knew she'd lose at trial. "You think she'll actually change? The counseling and everything," Amanda shrugged. "Honestly, probably not. People like Patricia Hendricks have deep-seated control issues. But at least she'll think twice before she acts on those impulses again. And she'll never have the power of an HOA position to hide behind." Life in Meadowbrook Estates slowly returned to normal. The new property management company that the HOA hired was professional and reasonable. They focused on actual issues like maintaining common areas and enforcing reasonable rules about things like lawn care and exterior maintenance. The petty harassment stopped. Patricia and her husband moved out of the neighborhood in September. I heard through the grapevine that they relocated to Florida. I felt a little bad for whatever community they moved to, but mostly I just felt relieved. The fire pit became something of a neighborhood gathering place. On cool evenings, neighbors would stop by with lawn chairs and beer, and we'd sit around the fire talking. Frank became a regular visitor. He'd bring his guitar sometimes and play old folk songs while we watched the flames. "You know," he said one evening in October, "I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. It's never been as friendly as it is now. People are actually talking to each other, looking out for each other. Patricia ran this place like a police state, and everyone was too afraid to push back. You did everyone a favor." "I just wanted to use my fire pit," I said. "Yeah, but you stood your ground. That took courage. A lot of people would have just given in, paid the fine, stopped using the fire pit. They would have let her win." I poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks drift up into the October night. I couldn't let it go. It was the principle of the thing. She was wrong, the law was on my side, and I wasn't going to be bullied. That's what made the difference. The following spring, the HOA held elections for a new vice president to replace Patricia. Several people suggested I should run. I declined politely but firmly. I had no interest in HOA politics. I just wanted to live my life, use my fire pit, and be left alone. They elected Linda Wu, the former secretary. She was a calm, reasonable person who actually understood that the HOA's job was to maintain the community, not to micromanage every aspect of residents' lives. Under her leadership, and Donald's continued presidency, Meadowbrook Estates became a genuinely nice place to live. The lawsuit Patricia had threatened to file against the HOA board never materialized. Apparently, her lawyer had advised her that she had no case, and besides, she couldn't afford more legal fees after paying my restitution. I did get one letter from her, delivered through her lawyer about a year after the sentencing. It was a formal apology, clearly written by her attorney, expressing regret for her actions and acknowledging that she had been wrong. It felt hollow, but I appreciated the gesture. I wrote back, keeping it brief. I acknowledged the apology and wished her well in her future endeavors. I didn't mean it particularly, but there was no point in holding a grudge. She had lost her position, her reputation, her money, and her home because of her own actions. That seemed like punishment enough. The fire pit still burns most evenings when the weather's nice. I've added some comfortable outdoor furniture, string lights, and a little sound system. It's become my favorite part of the house, the place where I decompress after work and enjoy the peace of my own property. Sometimes, when I'm sitting out there on a quiet evening, I think about that morning during the snowstorm when Patricia knocked on my door with her phone full of complaints and her absolute certainty that she was right. If I had just given in, if I had agreed to stop using the fire pit, would she have been satisfied? Or would she have just found something else to complain about, some other way to assert her authority? I think I know the answer. Patricia wasn't really upset about the fire pit. She was upset that someone in her domain wasn't following her rules, wasn't bowing to her authority. The fire pit was just the excuse. Standing up to her was the right choice, even though it led to months of stress and harassment. Because the alternative was letting her win, letting her establish that she could override the law with her bylaws, that she could bully residents into submission. Frank stops by one evening in early summer with a 6-pack of beer and some news. "You hear about the Hendricks?" he asks, settling into one of the chairs by the fire. "What about them?" "They got kicked out of their new HOA in Florida. Apparently, Patricia tried the same thing down there. Started filing violation notices left and right, calling the cops on people, the whole routine. But the president of that HOA used to be a lawyer. They shut her down immediately, filed a restraining order, and had her barred from all HOA meetings and functions. "How did you hear about this?" her ex-husband told me. "Did I mention they got divorced?" Yeah, apparently he'd had enough. He moved back north, bought a condo in Hartford. No HOA. I laugh and hand Frank a beer. Can't say I blame him. He said to tell you he's sorry for everything. Said he should have reined her in years ago, but he was afraid of her. Afraid of his own wife. You met Patricia. She was terrifying when she got going. We sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere down the street, kids are playing basketball. A dog barks. Normal suburban sounds. You know what the funny thing is? I say. All of this, everything that happened, it was all because she couldn't stand the idea that I was doing something she didn't approve of. That's it. The fire pit was legal, it was safe, it wasn't hurting anyone. But in her mind, she made the rules and I was breaking them, so I had to be punished. That's how petty tyrants operate, Frank says. They find a little bit of power somewhere and they abuse it until someone stops them. You stopped her. The whole neighborhood is better for it. The new HOA board has been in place for over a year now, and the difference is remarkable. They've repainted the community center, refurbished the playground, and organized several neighborhood events, including a summer barbecue and a holiday lights competition. People actually want to participate in HOA activities now because it's about building community, not enforcing arbitrary rules. I even joined a committee, the landscaping committee, which oversees the maintenance of common areas. It turns out that HOAs can actually be beneficial when they're run by reasonable people who understand their proper role. My fire pit is mentioned in the updated bylaws now, in a section about outdoor recreational fires. The language is clear. Fire pits are permitted as long as they meet county fire safety specifications, and the HOA can't prohibit or restrict them beyond what's required by law. It's become a template that other HOAs in Connecticut have started using. David Richardson, my lawyer, actually called me a few months ago to ask if he could use my case as an example in a seminar he was teaching about HOA law. "Your situation perfectly illustrates the limits of HOA authority," he said. "And more importantly, it shows how proper documentation and knowledge of your rights can protect you from harassment. I've been recommending to all my clients that they install security cameras and keep detailed records of any interactions with their HOA boards." "Happy to help," I said. "Though I hope no one else has to go through what I went through. Unfortunately, it's more common than you'd think. HOAs do a lot of good, but they also attract people who shouldn't have any kind of power over others. Your case is a great example of how to fight back when that happens." It's now been almost 2 years since Patricia pounded on my door during that snowstorm. 2 years since she decided that my legal, safe fire pit was somehow a threat to the neighborhood. 2 years since she started a campaign of harassment that ultimately destroyed her own life. I don't take any pleasure in what happened to her. I never wanted her to go to jail or lose her marriage or have to move away from her home. All I wanted was to be left alone to enjoy my property. But I also don't regret standing up to her. Because the alternative was teaching her that she could get away with that behavior, that she could bully people into submission, that her interpretation of the rules mattered more than the actual law. The fire pit burns tonight, like it does most nights. Friends are coming over later for a casual gathering. We'll grill some burgers, drink some beer, and enjoy the warm evening air. It's a simple pleasure, one that should never have turned into a months-long battle with an unhinged HOA board member. But it did, and I won, and the neighborhood is better for it. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't just about you. Sometimes it's about establishing boundaries that protect everyone, about showing that bullies and petty tyrants can't win just because they have a title and a rule book. The sun sets behind the trees, and I add another log to the fire. The flames leap up, warm and bright, a symbol of everything Patricia tried to take away and failed. My fire pit burns legal and free, and somewhere in Florida, Patricia Hendricks can see the smoke signals of her defeat. Life is good. The fire is warm, and the HOA actually works the way it's supposed to. That's all I ever wanted.